Good evening. It's 5:30, and I want to welcome you to our board work session. And we're going to be speaking about and learning about from our boundary revision team, all the report they put together, which is extensive. I've been trying to go through that today, and it's a long report. And I think I would like to now turn this over to Dr. Watts to introduce our revision team.
Thank you, President Hamada, members of the board, Ms. Halley and staff. First like to say, as the 5th largest and the 4th most diverse school district in Washington State, Kent School District has begun another school boundary reboundary process. And this process of changing school boundaries occurs typically when they've either grown or decreased based on the capacity of our schools within our district. And in addition, the adjustment of school boundaries serves to several purposes: to balance school enrollment, to coordinate school bus routes, and to enhance program offerings. The reboundary process that we are undergoing now does not happen without partnering, and certainly it is also a very normal process for school districts throughout this country. It is most typically occurring when a new school is built, such as the case in Kent School District. As a result, we have partnered with MGT Consulting Group, and we've become very close, working over the last several weeks together to assist and support us throughout this reboundary process. Working more closely with them is Mr. Israel Vela, Chief School Operations and Academic Support Officer. I will call on him to introduce MGT's staff, and they will begin our presentation this evening. Israel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Watts, members of the board, President Hamada, Ms. Halley, and members of our team. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to share the work, as Dr. Watts mentioned earlier. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about purpose for tonight, and also give a bit of an overview to bring us to this point. First of all, as you know, yes, President Hamada, a long report. Lots of work has been done by our consulting partners, and that work tonight, and the second objective of our evening tonight is really for them to present their work to date through a summary. They're going to summarize that report. In addition, at the end, we will leave time for you for questions as well on their work and any parts of the report that you might have. So to take us back just quickly, of an overview, our board took action in July, I believe it was the end of July 22nd, on an RFP process that you approved. We had a number of consultants that applied and submitted their proposals. We did an extensive interview process and formally selected MGT proudly, and they started their work on August 26th. Since that time, they've been hitting the ground running. I can't say it any other way, including visiting our large school district, over 72 square miles, as many of us know. They visited pretty much all of our schools and tracked some of the routing and those pieces that were important for their report. They will share tonight. I won't steal their thunder, the additional work that they've done, but I want to just bring us to this point of the interim boundary analysis report, which they will be presenting. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Rob Tanner, who will introduce the team as well. Rob?
Thank you, Iz, and we're happy to be here again to talk to you. I know I've talked to each of you, I think, at least once, if not many times. So we're happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen, and I have a PowerPoint that we'll kind of go through, and then we'll take questions at the end. So I will try to do that now. And share. All right, can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Excellent. Technology, don't fail me now. All right, here we go. With that, I'm going to let Dr. Razor kind of introduce us, and then we'll go on from there.
Good evening. It's great to be back with you again, and now especially since, as Israel alluded to, we've had the opportunity to visit Kent, and it is truly a great community. And as Israel said too, we saw almost every square mile of the community, and it was a great couple of days on site getting to see that, because as was said when we talked the first time, it's one thing to see it on paper, it's another thing to sit in the traffic or to drive around the mountain, if you will, and that gives a real special perspective. So as Rob kicked it to me, I oversee all of our projects, but especially projects like this, I take a more active role in, just from my past expertise as a school district executive. But Rob is leading this work along with Dr. Casey Price, and I'll let Casey say hello as well.
Hi again to many of you on the call tonight. Much like Rob, I was on many of the interviews. I think I missed 2 along the way. And so as many of you know, we've been working very closely together to obtain stakeholder feedback, which is really my role in this project, is to work closely with Rob and the team in Kent to make sure that we're hearing not only from you as the board, but from the members of your community. I remember one of the early priorities of this project was to make sure that the community was well represented and heard throughout the process. And certainly we have some community engagement upcoming that Rob will talk about in his presentation tonight. But we have spent the last several weeks through surveys and other stakeholder engagement, primarily through surveys, but we really focused on trying to hear back from the community. And I am happy to say once again that the survey results that we've received from your community are outstanding and something that you should be proud of. And I attribute that to having a strong team on the ground in Kent. They took it upon themselves to make signs and pass out invitations and to just really drive participation. And so Kent has by far the most diverse and engaged survey response that we've seen in recent memory through the work that we've done. And so you should feel good that your surveys and your responses are representative, and that your community definitely had an ample opportunity to participate in the early part of this process.
And if I can just jump back in just for a second, I'm glad Casey hit on that, because I got to see it firsthand in Kent. Every Kent school district site that we showed up at, you saw that there was active, just an active crying out for participation and for surveys and for that ability to have the voice heard. And Casey said this. The turnout from the community, the feedback from the community that we received from Kent is by far proportionally the largest amount of feedback we've ever received. But more than proportionally, just in sheer number, I think I've told you this before, we're doing a project with Fairfax County, Virginia, which is a school district with 180,000 students. We have gotten more feedback from Kent than from that community. So it is a true testament to your community. And although some of the suggestions we're going to be making are not going to be easy to do, they are the right thing to do. But what I would tell you is, that your community has had input, and that we're listening to the greater populace of the community when we make the recommendations we're going to make. And with that, I will hand it back to Rob.
Thanks, Mike and Casey. So I'd like to take just a brief time to go back over the process, if you will. I won't spend a ton of time on it, but I just wanted to, revisit it so that it's fresh in our mind. So one of the very first things, besides the kickoff, the initiation of this project, was to identify stakeholders and to, and to have those interviews with the leadership, many of you, if not all of you, and different staff at different levels through the district. And that really set the tone and gave us kind of a lay of the landscape as we started this. And then we had the community survey and the family survey, which Casey spoke and Mike spoke about the great turnout that we had there. It truly has been a bright spot for us because while some people may fear that input, we feel like that an engaged community in their school district is going to make a better school district. And then data collection, we collected all sorts of data from all sorts of different venues, mostly from Kent. They gave us everything that we needed and more. We were able to look up documents at other public sources, such as the Census Bureau and land permits and those type of things. And that all led us to, after analyzing that input, the data, to the interim report. And that's where we are today. And it is, I think, it's not said enough that this is an interim report because you have to start somewhere. And from this, through, feedback from this report and from the ideas that are raised in this report, then we'll come to be able to use that in the final report and the final recommendations. As Casey said, we do have some community engagement already scheduled. I think they start this weekend. Saturday, I believe, is the first one, and then we'll be followed by another one on Tuesday the 8th and Thursday the 10th. And so we were working with the district with these forums. In addition to that, the district has communications has hosted a thought exchange that will also be highlighting in our forums, or advertising, if you will, in our forums as well. So there's going to be multiple ways for community to provide feedback as it comes to the interim report. And then finally, the final report. So taking all that information, all that input, and coming up with what that final report and recommendations are. The work plan, this is the work plan that we came up with at project initiation, and I'm happy to say that I believe we are on track with where we want to be to finish in that second week of January. And so with that, I'm going to kind of go into a summary of the report. There's as you said, it's very extensive. There's a lot of data there, and I can't go over all of it. So I'm going to try to hit the highlights. And then if you have any other questions about it, even if I can't answer them tonight, please get those questions to me through your leadership, and I will respond to them as quickly as I can. I hope that I can answer most of them tonight, but if for some reason I can't, know that I will get back to you very quickly. So KSD's enrollment has remained fairly stable. As you can see on the historical side, there is a slight decrease, especially from 2016 to 2019, but it's less than 1,000 students. There was more than 1,000 student decline between 2019 and this year, and I would mostly attribute that to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen that nationwide. That's pretty well in line with what we're seeing. And if you look down at the elementary level versus the middle school and high school grade levels for enrollment, you'll see that the middle and high school didn't really dip much, but the elementary did. And again, that's kind of what we've seen nationwide. Families are holding off on kindergarten and preschool and first grade if they can. They have that ability to do that. So we feel like when we projected our enrollment out the next 5 years, that you will see a slight bump in enrollment next year, assuming that we have somewhat of a normal education year next year. Fingers crossed. After that, the projected enrollment is still pretty steady, although we see a slight decline. What we've seen across the country everywhere is that a lot of Americans are waiting longer or are having less children and waiting longer to have them. So even with population increases, we're not seeing a ton of enrollment increases. And then looking at capacity, this chart is kind of a snapshot of today versus projections 5 years from today, or 5 years from, I guess, last August. One thing that I wanted to really point out and say is that, your enrollment in elementary school exceeds your capacity. And this capacity number is including 177 portable facilities that you have throughout the district. So without those 177 portables, this insufficiency in seats would be much larger. So I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out so that we're talking about comparing apples to apples here. So as you can see, you have an insufficient number of seats at elementary, and you have some excess in middle school and high school. When we look at 5 years, 5 years from now, that is going to be helped slightly because of the new school. So we're adding 750 capacity thereabouts to elementary school to help relieve some of that. But again, you're still going to be with some insufficiency in seats, even considering that you have 177 portables. And this slide kind of gives you a visual representation of that. So this one in the top left is your elementary school boundaries, and we've shaded them a color depending on where they are. So red represents schools that are at least 100% or higher in their utilization rate. And when I say with the utilization rate, that is going to be, their enrollment as a ratio to their capacity. The blue represents, someone is right there in that 90 to 99% utilization rate, and the green is 89% and less. So as you can see, elementary schools have a larger capacity issue than middle school and high school. Those leadership interviews that we talked about in the process, like I said, I think we held right around 50 or so. We spoke with the board, we spoke with the superintendent's cabinet, central office administrators, and transportation and food service. When we spoke with principals, and it was really good. I have to say I enjoyed every single conversation I had. I felt like we got good information, and though it was varied, these are some of the common themes that we got, and I don't want to necessarily read them to you, but I think the bigger ones that I would point out would be the equitable access to educational programs, the better feeder pattern alignment, the sixth grade moving to middle school, and the reduction of the Kent Lake attendance boundary. Those all stuck in my mind as heavy hitters, if you would, as far as commonality. The family survey, these are kind of just highlights. We have all of the raw data in the report for you to see, but just kind of hitting the highlights. Most of the respondents who did not attend, that their students did not attend their boundary, said that was due to them wanting to go or needing to go to some other program outside that was only hosted at a school outside of their boundary. Most respondents said they chose to live where they lived due to affordability or to proximity to their employment. The most common travel method for students was by car, including carpooling or with a friend or a neighbor. The second most common way was by school bus. Many of the students respondents said that they traveled by multiple methods, whether it be car, bus, walking. There was multiple ways of travel. Nearly 30% of the respondents said their students had a very easy or walkable commute, and over 86% of the respondents said that they had a very easy or easy commute, meaning that their students only had a 15-minute travel transit ride, which is very good. There was a small population that said that they had an extensive commute of 45 minutes or more. Nearly half the respondents believe that a student shouldn't ride the bus more than 15 minutes, or should be on the bus less than 15 minutes or less. 90% said 30 minutes or less. Of course, that 90% is also including that 47.6%. But again, 90% of the respondents would have said 30 minutes or less for transit to school, which puts you fairly square where you need to be with what your respondent said their travel time was. And I think the last one to me is, or not the last one, but the least one here is one of the most important ones, and that is that respondents indicated that their top 4 most common and most important factors in school boundaries was aligning the elementary, middle school, and high school strands so that classes of students could progress in the system together from kindergarten to high school. It was to reduce travel transportation issues. It was to balance enrollment to address school capacity, and to provide equitable access to programs across the district. And then last, the respondents reported that their primary method to address school overcapacity or undercapacity was to adjust school boundaries. So kind of diving a little deeper into some of the adjustments, and I know we can't go a street by street view for you, in this type of setting. But again, if you have any of those type questions, I'd be happy to look them up and get them to you. But the new elementary school, these are your current school boundaries near where the new elementary school. The arrow represents where the elementary school is located. So this is the proposed changes. So to fill up, if you will, the new elementary school, this is how we've proposed. I do want to mention that this top portion of what is now the Neely O'Brien boundary has very few, if any, students. It's a highly commercial industrial area and does not have a whole lot of students. So to get students into that boundary, we had to go east. And so as you can see, we have moved, we've gotten rid of this Panther Lake, what I call an island boundary, that is in the new elementary. This piece here that was in Springbrook, there's a small piece that was in East Hill, are all now inside that new elementary school. Of course, by making the adjustments to Springbrook, to Panther Lake, that also helps their reduction or their overcrowded issue. This area right here is probably the highest overcapacity of all of the schools, right in this heart of this area, or at least one of 2. So again, we've cut Neely O'Brien's boundary down considerably, so to then restore some students to Neely O'Brien so it's not under capacity, we have taken pieces of the Kent and Scenic Hill school boundary to now become part of the Neely O'Brien. In addition, when East Hill, it's a highly dense area right here with apartment complexes. When losing that little piece, we ended up moving the boundary of East Hill down into Meadow Ridge, which again helps Meadow Ridge with their overcapacity issue. And as a whole, when you look at this as a whole, it is helped each and every school. And so this table kind of illustrates where that is with, with pluses and minuses and where the students reside. aligning the feeder strands. I think, to me, this was the number one most important factor by respondents, and I think it's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important too, because it speaks to more than just the aligning of them for allowing students to, excuse me, to be with their peers, their neighborhood peers through high school, and their elementary peers through high school. But also, and I'll talk about it later, but it speaks to equitable distribution of programs and access to different programs or clubs and things like that. So what we tried to do, and I felt like this was important, was we tried not to move the elementary boundaries to align feeder strands. So what I mean by that is, yes, we have moved elementary boundaries to address capacity for the new elementary school, or to just adjust enrollment in some schools, but we didn't move them to align the feeder strands. We had moved the middle school boundaries to fit whole elementary boundaries, and then the high schools, we moved their boundaries to fit entire middle school boundaries. I hope I haven't murdered that too much, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, you can see these elementary boundaries here: Fairwood, Ridgewood, Lake Young, and Seuss Creek. That is now, that is a middle school boundary now. The same thing with Meeker. It is, these elementary boundaries are all the same for the middle school, so that there's no overlapping. An elementary school will feed entirely into a middle school. A middle school will feed entirely into a high school. And then this table just kind of represents the Kent Ridge strand. And then the next few slides kind of breaks down each one of these, and they're the same, just like I had said. Every elementary school feeds entirely into a middle school feeds entirely into a high school. It's a good time for me to get a drink too. So overcrowding of elementary schools, when we look at addressing that, we're proposing that, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit further in a minute, but adjusting elementary school boundaries where we geographically could. And what I mean by that is, if we have an elementary school that is over capacity, but the elementary schools that are surrounding that elementary school are also over capacity, then it's really not going to do us much good to change those boundaries. So we were only able, I think, we had like 4 scenarios where we're changing, I think, nine elementary school boundaries where we could, based upon the space available in neighboring schools. Also, to address overcrowding of schools, we're proposing moving the 6th grade from elementary to middle school. Like I said before, there is more than 1,000 insufficient seats, and there are currently around 2,000, a little less than 2,000 actually, 6th grade students in 2021. And then, so moving 6th grade to middle school in combination with the new elementary school will give you 1,750 excess seats in elementary school. Now, that will help with some reduction in some of your portable facilities, but it won't entirely eliminate it. To do that, you would have to bring what is now the Kent Phoenix Academy or Kent Mountain View Academy back to a middle school. Without doing that, moving the 6th grade to middle school wouldn't be possible because you wouldn't have enough space. And then finally, I think conducting a comprehensive facility master plan to establish, excuse me, locations for possible additions or new construction or additions for school buildings, because like I said, you currently have 177 portable facilities, And this boundary survey this boundary review is not going to solve all of that. It will start you down the path, but it will not completely solve it. Inequitable distribution of educational programs. This was something that came up quite a bit in our interviews, where that some programs have been placed in schools based upon where there is space and not based upon where the need is. And I know, and I'm not going to say anyone's name or any school name, but I did speak with a principal that was very concerned about some of their inclusive education students that had sensory issues that were on the bus for 30 minutes or longer. And they were very concerned about, what that did to that inclusive ed student and the issues that might have. And so when we look at distribution of these educational programs, aligning the feeder strands is paramount, because then you can, and then also addressing the overcrowding of the school. So those three things are really tied together, because in a perfect world, I think we would see your 4 strands that are aligned vertically, and then for a lot of programs, you can make sure that each strand has a program in their strand, in one of their elementary schools. You can't have every program in every school, and I understand that, but at least if I'm a student and I can't go to my boundary school because I want to attend a program or I need to attend a program, at least I'll have the opportunity to meet back with my neighborhood peers in middle school or high school. And additionally, we also discussed that, reviewing where educational programs should be a continuously reviewed loop, so that things are need and where students live and which students need different educational programs are going to change over time. And so if you have that continuous review, then you can address those in small adjustments rather than large wholesale adjustments. And then this ties into moving with the 6th grade to middle school. As you're all well aware, the state of Washington learning standards and assessments are structured in K-5, 6-8, and 9-12 bands. There was multiple administrators, especially middle school principals, that brought up specifically the state math and science assessments that are administered in the 8th grade, but also having those students for 3 years to better prepare them for high school was something that concerned them, because they felt like the first few months of middle school was getting them adjusted to that transition. And then, the last few months of middle school is, preparing for that adjustment to high school. And they were really would like to see that extra year to help prepare those students. Balance of enrollment, as I talked about before, we did this where it was geographically available. So these 2 particular schools, Cedar Valley and Jenkins Creek, Cedar Valley was underutilized, and Jenkins Creek was just a little over 100% capacity. So we're proposing moving these boundaries to balance the enrollment. And again, the table is kind of the plus and minus for each school for students that reside there. Again, same thing with these schools, Covington, Grass Lake, and Horizon. And some of this also helps with the alignment of middle schools and high schools into vertical strands as well. And here's Millennium, Pine Tree, and Meadow Ridge. And then I also would say there was this little island, and there's several apartment complexes here, and it was chopped up amongst several schools. I think Pine Tree was one of them that had a little border. So we've adjusted to eliminate that. So even with the changes in the boundaries, we were able to balance the enrollment a little bit and eliminate those island boundary areas so that students could go to their nearest school, or at least as close as we possibly could. And then here's Sunrise and Meridian. And this does help balance these two elementary schools, but it really helped balance the difference between Meridian Middle School and Madison Middle School too. It helped a lot at the middle school level when we were balancing enrollment, when we were looking at aligning feeders as well. And then just the Kent Lake boundary. This came up multiple times, and it was mentioned to us that there were students that had long bus rides that might pass right by the high school that's closest to them to go to Kent Lake High School, travel a long distance, go Kent Lake High School. So we did the best we could with this. We couldn't do it completely reduce it because it would put too much strain on Kent Meridian High School as far as the enrollment goes. But I would like to point out that, so Kentwood is in this area. I think Kent Meridian's here and Kent Lake's over here. So, you have these students that are very close to Kentwood that were traveling all the way to Kent Lake for high school. And same thing, as far as the proximity to Kent Meridian. Again, we couldn't solve that completely, but we did help it. And also, I think these pictures illustrate what aligning feeders does. For example, this little hook compared to over here, this little hook is Crestwood Elementary. And so these students right here in Crestwood would end up going to middle school or elementary middle school with their peers, but then in high school have to go to Kent Lake versus going to Kentwood with the rest of the Crestwood Elementary students. So I think that also, I know that's not what this slide's talking about, but I think it's a good illustration point of about aligning your feeder strands. And with that, I feel like I've done a ton of talking, so I'm going to stop sharing and take your questions and get a drink. I put you all to sleep.
No. Well, I'll start. No one else is jumping in because I obviously the board and I have heard from people. Specifically, I've heard several comments about that Carriage Crest Elementary border because up there, Carriage Crest, a lot of those kids are way closer to Northwood. It's an odd division anyway, but they're way closer to Northwood, and there's schools that feed into Northwood that are closer to Meeker. So just trying to understand that how that was all divided up. Because, when we're talking about bus rides and things like that, I mean, there's the potential that kids that could walk to either of these schools are going to now go be bused to a different one.
Sure. And first, I'd want to say that a lot of this is helpful, but it is by far perfect. We are trying to work with what we have and not just start over, from scratch. But I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I can pull the report up because that will be able to hopefully be able to see. I can point out some things. So I am on the report now, and I'm going to try to scroll to some of these middle schools. Sorry, bear with me.
No.
Okay. So I think this is where the Northwood and Meeker are currently versus what the proposal is. Meeker, I believe, is right in this area, is where the middle school is.
No, it's actually a little,
Because I think that's why we had this division in the elementary school to begin with. This little hook here, Glen Ridge kind of went up. So I believe Meeker is right on that point. Maybe, I hope I'm not wrong.
no, it's moving so fast.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And I didn't want to print out 154 pages.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I know right now Carriage Crest is split up, and it's interesting still how Carriage Crest is split up because some of those students live closer to Meeker and they go to Northwood currently. But again, there's like Glen Ridge or Lake Youngs seem to be closer to Meeker than Northwood. So it's just the questions I'm getting are the way it was divided up. Why? Because it seems, one of the things we talked about was not, accessibility and not necessarily having bus rides there.
Sure. Sure.
So Northwood is just off to the other side of Ridgewood Elementary. They're basically on the same road. And so where you see Ridgewood, Northwood is just off to the side there.
Right in this area?
Yeah, no, it's further to the right. No,
Okay.
further to the right. Yeah. So so when you look at it and it's hard without seeing the actual pinpoints on the map.
Yeah, I could go over and try to find it, but I believe, like I said, I thought Meeker was right here in this area when I looked at it. And that's why I ended up going with Carriage Crest to Meeker. Even though if you lived in this area of Carriage Crest, you might be, close to Ridgewood. And like I said, it's not a perfect fit.
Right.
Yeah. Like Lake Young, for example, I struggled with Lake Young because it is a large boundary, but it's large because there's not a lot of density there.
Right.
And so trying to figure out how to split, without completely, changing Lake Young 100%. It was difficult. So like I said, I tried to keep the elementary boundaries more or less where they are. And we could look at trying to, shift those a little bit. And then making the middle school, some of the older students at middle school and high school be the ones that had to travel.
Yeah, I do know that some people on the very edge of that Carriage Crest border could walk to Ridgewood or Northwood. So they're that close in the corner of that Carriage Crest border that they could walk to Ridgewood or Northwood.
Here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just, like I said, I've gotten questions about that.
Well, I think that's a great input. I mean, we could definitely look at, is there a way that we could reboundary Fairwood, Carriage Crest, and Ridgewood that balances the enrollment the way it needs to be in those areas, but, that might shrink Carriage Crest a little bit so that, maybe the boundary is in this area or something. So it's a little bit better. We definitely, I think that's what the input is all about. I'm not telling you that definitely can be done, but I think it's worth looking at, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. And just a couple more things. So all of these moves are contingent upon finishing the 2 new buildings. Plus, then there would need to be time to to perform any necessary building adjustments to add that, put Sequoia Middle School back. Yes.
Yes. I mean, your new elementary school has to be, ready to accept students. And then Phoenix, their new building, and then yes, where they currently are, bringing that back into as a middle school would have to be completed before this, before you could, those are the dominoes that have to fall first.
Right. So when we talk about all these changes, are there any changes that you're proposing that would take place in the 21-22 school year?
Well, I will let some of the district leadership speak to that more, but I would say I believe it's my understanding that the new elementary school in Phoenix will be done, excuse me, for the 21-22 school year, and that especially since there's not students in buildings, that it's quite possible that the current Phoenix building could be renovated in time as well. But again, I think that timing is something that you as a board and your leadership will have to work through, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I could
under the surface.
I would like to just add, in terms of the current KMVA KPA building, recall we made revisions to it to house KMVA. And during those revisions, we made those for that purpose, so that we are prepared and ready to go with that building.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I can say something, and I'm going to speak in generalities, not in specifics to Kent, but when we do this work, boundary lines can move, schools can't. And a lot of times you're a victim of the geography of where schools were built 40, 50 years ago, the way the population looked 40, 50 years ago. And again, this is more generalities and not Kent, especially the baby boom communities. They would give land to school districts to put schools in to make their communities more attractive. And sometimes you ended up with communities next door, all with their own elementary schools, especially. So that makes that a little difficult. And what Rob was talking about earlier, we potentially can make some adjustments around this, but we might just as easily, by fixing this issue, create the same issue as it ripples across. But something that Rob talked about is that probably then a next step is looking at a facilities master plan of, especially of the older buildings, because as we traveled around Kent, one of the things that I noticed is there are some beautiful schools, some of the most beautiful schools I've seen. And then there's also some schools that are showing their age. That's no fault of the maintenance department. They are just schools that were designed to last a certain amount of time. And that's probably the next phase of this, especially when you have equity as such an important part of your school district's mission.
I appreciate that. And I also, understand that, right. So we do want to make sure that our schools are diverse and inclusive. And typically when you have those neighborhood schools, you will get those neighborhood kids, which really is very homogenous. And so in order to allow for diversity, then we do have to make decisions to bring other students and to switch it around. Otherwise we would have zip code determined. I mean, it would kind of fall into, what has happened, redlining, even unintentional,
Yes.
right? You'd have, so that's also one of the reasons why there's, and that's kind of an answer that I give when people ask about, well, what about this? And I said, well, you have to consider, the population of the school and the communities and what that looks like, and the lack of diversity and opportunity that exists in those spaces. So we have to consider that as well.
And we definitely want to take, one of the recommendations was making sure that the opportunity exists in all parts of the school district, even if that's mirror programs or balanced programs, because that is so important. And you make a great point, especially in such a diverse community as Kent. You do want to make sure that you haven't unintentionally redlined, even in especially in a marginalized community, to where the same time, something that we see happen in some districts, and I think that real efforts are being made sure to make this doesn't happen, is we have to make sure that in an effort to make our schools more diverse, we're actually not taking opportunities away from students because of the proximity between them and their schools. I don't think that's an issue, but that's one of those things we always try to keep front of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, unfortunately, neighborhoods are still very segregated.
Mhm.
So,
Oh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, President Hamada.
I was just going to say to that point, that was something that we heard from the leadership interviews, was that, especially when it comes to Kent Lake, that there were students in more vulnerable situations that were being bused out to Kent Lake to make that a more diverse school. And while that is an admirable ambition, those students weren't able to, they were losing out on, some extracurricular activities and things like that because of transportation issues. They had to catch the bus home because there's not any other way to get home if they didn't. So they couldn't stay for sporting events or extracurricular activities. And then also parents couldn't engage in the school as well either. So I just wanted to say that was something that was brought up.
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to bring up transportation. I thought it was sort of fascinating to see that walking versus car survey question. I do wonder, though, it would have been helpful to see that by grade levels, because obviously your elementary kiddies walking, which happens down in the valley, versus high schoolers walking are two different things. And I couldn't really gauge from that, even though I was really looking for that transportation question. I'm hoping we can break that down. And then one of the questions I had was on the Neely O'Brien. It still seems like much higher enrollment there than other schools. And so is it that Kent Elementary has too many portables? Is that the concern there, or what did you find being problematic?
I will address your first question first, and we'll swing back to Casey because I'm hoping she's got the answer for that. I think we might be able to break that down a little bit further by grade level on the survey question, but I'll let her, tell me if that's true or not here in a second.
I'm working on it now.
Okay.
Yeah, and can I add to that?
We can definitely do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
we can definitely do it.
I also wanted to add to that. I think part of my question that came up earlier on transportation when we first met had to do with specific population, talking about having to move their kids, having to walk their kids to schools. And so I also am a little bit concerned that we didn't reach all of our population down in the valley. So I looked at the languages spoken at home, and that was a concern of mine. So it would be interesting to see not only grade level, but also the languages spoken at home, because there are specific groups that brought up that concern to the board. So, okay, thank you.
Great. Well, it sounds like we definitely can get that to you. I don't know that we'll have it for you tonight, but we'll get it to you for sure. And then the second question, Lord, I've already spaced out on it. What was the second question?
It was on Neely O'Brien. Sorry, yes, Neely O'Brien versus Kent Elementary and portables.
Yes. Well, I think Dr. Razor said it really well, and that is you can move the boundaries, but you can't move the schools. And so that was really about trying to balance that area so that we weren't having someone who would normally walk to Neely O'Brien now has to get on a bus type situation. So if we cut too deep, we were going to run into those situations. And then as I spoke to during my presentation, this new school is going to help, but it is not by any means going to eliminate some overcrowding. It's just not. Like I said, with 177 portables, that's quite a bit to overcome in one construction swoop.
Wanted to add just one more thing around portables. My team is currently conducting an analysis of the 170 portables, and I want to just share with the board that portables are not a long-term fix. They have a life expectancy that's very short. They cannot be moved multiple times. And so my team is conducting that analysis just from a fiscal perspective. And so I just wanted to share that. We will have that data.
And Israel, if I can share something, when we do facilities master planning, we do a component of that called educational suitability, and it's where we give schools a suitability grade about what kind of a learning environment they are. If there is one portable, we say that school is not educationally suitable, that in a certain component. It's our opinion philosophically, but then also I would even say our expert opinion, especially when it comes to equity, that portables sometimes they are necessary. Things happen where they just need to be used, but they can't be a long-term. They can't be a long-term fix. And David, I'm going to call on you out of left field here. What was the beautiful elementary school we visited?
Panther Lake.
Okay, so Panther Lake Elementary is Panther Lake Elementary, and I'm a guy who used to build schools for a living, is maybe the most beautiful elementary school I have ever seen. And I want you to imagine yourself being a 5-year-old kindergarten student or a 6-year-old student from a at-risk home, at-risk community, and you pull up to that beautiful building on a bus the first day of school, and they take your hand and they lead you out back and you go to a trailer instead of going into that beautiful school. And again, those things happen, but that's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing here, is making sure that every student is able to go to school in a school and not in a building out back. And that that's a true, it actually, and I hope I don't sound too hokey, that's truly about excellence and equity and community when you make those kind of decisions. I remember the first time we talked, I talked about, you have to make tough decisions, because without those tough decisions, you can't have equity or excellence or community. But this is one first step to get here. And it isn't going to happen overnight. That question happened earlier. There are some dominoes that have to happen. But I think the other thing that I do want to reiterate is nobody on this conference call tonight put Kent School District in the position it's in. These are things that happen over years of time. And now, in order to get these things undone, you have to have systemic thinking. You've got to look things systemically. It's one of the reasons that we're proposing nesting. We like to call it a nesting doll attendance pattern, where these elementary schools feed into these middle schools, which feed into these high schools, and it can be very systemic, and makes it very easily understandable for families, makes it very easily transportation and maintenance and other things like that just becomes so much easier to do, which allows the district to focus more on what happens in the classroom.
And I think that's valuable. I live in Kentucky, and what we say here is, there's a lot of students that live in trailers, and then we bring them to school and we put them in another trailer. And so, and I know that's kind of as Mike said, kind of a hokey, all shucks Kentucky type of thing. But I think he said it beautifully around, you have at-risk students that, and not even at-risk students, you just have students in there that are, watch their friends in the new nice building, and they're in the portable. So.
Do all our elementary schools have portables? Are there any without?
Most of our elementary schools have a portable. Whether they're being used for a classroom is a different question. But I will say we have had to do that because of our capacity.
Yeah.
I think there was some schools that did not.
There are a few, and they would have had portables on them, but we have moved them over the last few years to other schools. And then I did want to get back to Director Vangadaslam. At Kent Elementary, we have 8 portables, and at Neely O'Brien, we have 11 current portables, just so that you know.
So, yeah, so that's confusing to me even more. So the reason we have such high population at Neely is because we do not want them, those students, to have to walk to Kent Elementary, but rather use the transportation as it exists or walk to the school. Is that correct?
We have
Justin.
I'm trying to
is-
understand why we have 709 kids at Neely O'Brien and 410 or so students at Kent Elementary.
So we do have a radius, I think we've shared before, of a walking radius. And so we apply that across our district. Kent Elementary over time was drawing from the boundaries you're seeing currently. And so that also added the bus routes to be able to bring forth those students to Neely O'Brien. But the radius for walking is the same. I know Justin is with us today and he could share more, but we have bus routing that also gets transported to Neely O'Brien.
Hi, this is Justin. So what I would say about Neely O'Brien is probably know we have a newer apartment complex there, Grandview Apartments. We currently transport 2 full school buses from that apartment complex to Neely O'Brien, which only occurred within the last 3 years. And that apartment complex will now go to the new Valley Elementary. Another area that receives busing is the Riverview Boulevard neighborhood, and that will also go to the new Valley School in this proposal. Kent Elementary and Neely O'Brien are very close to each other. You could walk between the 2 schools and still be within our district walk distance for an elementary student. So that is split by James Street right now.
Very busy street.
So yeah, that's some information about that.
Well, maybe we can get back to that, but I'm still not really clear why there's such disparity between Neely O'Brien and Kent Elementary, given the proximity of those 2 schools. But we can get back on that.
No, I think
Yeah,
we
we can get you back.
And Director Vangadaslam, specifically, you're referring to the enrollment, correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we can research certainly and provide.
The boundary, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That brings up a very valid point, and I appreciate that. I'd like to understand that population difference there too, was going to be one of my questions. And also, learning about the portables is interesting. This probably is not the proper time to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. Have we ever investigated adding on to our buildings, seeming we have property in some of these areas instead of having portables? Has that ever been a thing that we looked at when we're discussing portables?
Yes, I'll let Director Dave Buzzard share a little bit about that. But yes, we have not only multi-purpose rooms, but we've done some other projects as well. So Dave?
Yeah, thanks. President Hamada, you hit that right on the head. Before my tenure here at especially Lake Young's and at Pine Tree, that's why when you go to those schools, you'll actually see what's called an annex building. And back in the 90s, multiple portables on the school property were in disarray. So Fred Long, with a bond, I think it was in 2006, actually took some of those schools and built those hard brick and mortar annex buildings, which became classrooms with a bathroom inside of them and a teacher space on each one. So that's what you usually do. Attaching to a building can sometimes be a little, it can be disruptive because you have to attach somewhere where there may be a classroom and you have to give it up to become a hallway. So that's where annexes become a very valid point in school districts.
Dave, if I could.
And we've never, I want to get this before I lose this train of thought.
Sure.
And we've never investigated perhaps doing something like that instead of maintaining these portables, or was it not cost efficient, or?
So the 2016 bond did not have that, but I can tell you through my tenure here, and Israel will back this up, and even some of my talks with Dr. Watts, that is one of my #1 goals for our next bond or levy, is to eliminate these temporary buildings that we have that we call portables, and get back in some brick and mortar buildings. I think, again, MGT has, they've hit that point. They noticed it right off the bat as I drove those gentlemen around that day in Kent, and that was one of their biggest things. So yes, I believe as a community that is something that we should look at on our next bond and levy issue.
So if I can build on that sort of from a national perspective, but also just from what we've seen at Kent, portables are something that you do out of necessity, and then they just become easy. And they, a renovation, you're looking at anywhere of the magnitude that we're talking about, adding an annex onto a building, 12 to 18 months. A portable, in a couple months you can get there, and for much less of the cost. Now, over time, it may cost more. It's almost like a rent to own type of scenario with that. But what we also notice in Kent School District and this is where we talk about things that happen over time and they just kind of become easy then. But in Kent School District, there isn't a shortage of student seats across the district. And then, so for essentially zero to little cost, you can then start investing in new construction of new schools instead of investing over time in portables and an annexing of buildings, by balancing out student enrollment across the school district where the seats exist. And especially now with the new schools being built, and that is one of the main reasons we're recommending the 6th grade move into the middle schools. Is it suddenly opens up seats across the district in elementary, and then it's a perfect combination. Also, when you look at the academic side of things, that the entire way that the state of Washington is structured for accountability is the 6-8 model, which then sets up students for better success and sets the schools up for better success. But we often have worked with school districts that have done the annex add-on, and then what you end up having a lot of times in a school district then is you have a middle or an elementary school with 1,200 students at capacity, and 2 miles down the road, a 1,000 student building with 250 kids in it. And then you have an inefficient use of either of those buildings.
I have a question. Well, I have several questions, but you did take into consideration the huge development in Lake Point in the Covington area, correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think we drove by that area on multiple occasions actually, and looked at that. And then we also took into account, projections for population in the future as well when we looked at this.
And they're also planning a huge another huge apartment complex, which is going to be multifamily units too. So just want to make sure that you are aware of that. one of the things with the people questions and the community meetings coming up, which anybody that asked me or on my social media site, I was saying, listen in tonight. But a lot of them wanted to know that they don't think they're going to have enough time at these community meetings to get their questions answered. So I think I found a interesting email from Dr. Watts there showing that if you have questions or have thoughts, you can email boundary@kent.k12.wa.us so your words could be heard that way. And also you can go to Thought Exchange, and thank you, Dr. Watts, for pointing those out in your email tonight. For our community, if they don't feel they get enough input from the 3 community meetings set up, those 2 avenues are available along with writing the board or public testimony at a board. I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. I'm wondering about the magnet school that was talked about at Kent Lake. Can you tell me a little bit about that as an alternative?
Well, thank you for bringing up that communication piece, because first off, because that is an excellent point. And these community forums we're not going to be able to answer everyone's questions at those. I mean, that's going to be more of an input, but if they will either their thoughts or their questions, if they email to that address that you said, then we'll be able to get the answers to those questions. And I believe Melissa is going to put up a kind of a frequently asked questions with answers on your website, so that you know, you may not even have to ask the question; it may have already been asked and answered. So that's definitely, and then a thought exchange is another avenue. So we wanted to have multiple ways to address that. So thank you for that. And then the magnet programs, you know, there's all sorts of one, and I really wasn't trying to put my finger on one. But one of the things I did notice when I was at Kent Lake is that CTE building that is there, and it's very nice. And so that's a very that could be a very interesting draw to Kent Lake for any students that want. So, you know, to say, hey, I do want to make that travel because they have a program that I would like to, you know, that I would like to participate in. And so instead of forcing students because of where they live to go to Kent Lake, you know, if you have some magnet programs, whether it be arts or whether it be journalism or whether it be what have you, engineering, CTE, I mean, the options are limitless only by your imagination, and, you know, and maybe possibly some cooperative efforts from industry in your community that are looking for some specialized skills from students straight out of the high school to partner with anything in that type of thing. Like I said, again, that way you're not necessarily, you know, forcing students, you're drawing them there and they want to come to Kent Lake, even if it does mean a long transit ride.
Well, you know, and one of the things we heard too, and this is not just a Kent problem. We see this in a lot of the districts that we work in. I've seen this in districts that I've personally worked in, is schools get a reputational label. And when a school gets a reputational label, sometimes it's founded, most times it's unfounded, but then it becomes generational. And all of a sudden you don't want to go to Kent Lake, but you don't even know why you don't want to go to Kent Lake. So what a magnet program does in that regard is it flips the script on the school. It gives a reason to go. And again, you know, it's not our place in this study to suggest what type of magnet program there are, and there are countless ones. There are scores of great ones, but Kent Lake especially, I mean, that's a beautiful building, has a beautiful career and technical education building on the same campus with the right programs and the right choice. I would say, you know, programs that students choose to be a part of, that school could easily be at capacity.
I think too, offering and putting it a high priority, if we would ever decide to go that way, is getting extracurricular or after-school transportation somehow. I know they've gotten a couple of bus after school for kids who needed needed more help in their homework, and they wanted to stay after. We found the funding to do that, I think, a couple of days a week. The principal out there was talking to me about that. But that all the participation, if we could, in magnet schools, if they could still identify with their school by, maybe turning out for sports or whatever, we would want a component of transportation. And it's probably way out there, but we might want to be talking to South King County, the King County Council, and see if we couldn't maybe get a couple of buses out there. I mean, they'd go up one way a couple hours a night, and that would be all the way up Covington Way and back, down to the routes. I know that's far-fetched, but that's partnerships there. So there's a lot of people go up and down Covington Way. I think they might be surprised how many riders they'd pick up there. So just a thought. And that's all my question. And I thank you very much I did print out this 164-page thing, and I had tons of trouble with my printer in between because it's not used to printing at that level, but I appreciate all the hard work. I'm going to try to study this because I can already see that people are really interested in this and going to want it done as well as we can do it. One of the things that is kind of a concern, though, but it looks like people are picking up, December's a holiday month. I wonder, I know we plan to have those community connections in December, but I hope people don't say, well, why did you do this in December? Because they want to think of other things. I don't know. That's just a thought.
And I have a question about the move, the sixth graders moving up to the middle school. And I saw that it is ranked at the bottom, but you're recommending that, and I understand the curriculum alignment and the whole design issue with that. Can you talk about what you heard from the community engagements regarding why it was so low ranked for them? Like, what were their biggest concerns? And I think we need to be able to address them.
Well, we really don't have that answer. Again, this was just a survey at the beginning, and it was a rank order. So the rank order was, hey, here's the most important things. That one just ended up being ranked last, within the rank order of pieces. But I will say that, moving sixth grade to middle school is a linchpin, or I wouldn't have suggested it, moving it, as far as the alignment of middle school, of elementary, middle schools, and high schools, and quite frankly, looking at the data with overcapacity at elementary school.
And just to build on that, we knew coming in that was a factor. To Rob's point, to families, when you look at the factors, that's sort of an odd factor. Just as a question, when you look at the other things that are important, that are in there. But also to Rob's point, when we look at this, that is completely a completely a linchpin. When we discovered that our recommendation that we already had in our gut, just giving it a first pass, when we saw then that the curricular alignment with the way the state of Washington approaches things matched up with 6-8 as well, that pushed us further in that direction also. And just in the fact that that it makes the district a much more systemic district, and it makes things much more efficient. And you'll I try not to use the word efficient too much, because when I use that, people start to think, well, he's just talking about money. He's just talking about money. Many times what I'm also trying to use is a synonym of efficient, which is effective. And it makes the district more effective. And sometimes when you're more effective, that's when there are exponential assets that come from things. And just the opportunities that the sixth graders will have as being part of a middle school, they can have a more rigorous curriculum. It allows in the, and you're seeing the old middle school principal in me come out here. It allows more programmatic opportunities in scheduling. When you now have 3 grades worth of teachers to schedule, you now have 3 grades worth of teachers to cover, you now have 3 grades worth of teachers to sponsor activities. So there are many reasons that I'm personally a proponent of it. But for Kent, there are those many reasons as well that it makes sense.
So
I think that would be great information to have on our website, because I know that's a question, and I know a lot of folks don't necessarily understand the data that supports that move. And so it might be a really good idea to have some of that information available just for folks. And it may already be on there. I'm sorry, it might be on there. I don't know. But I think those are the types of questions and data points that would be really helpful to have.
And if I could just chime in real quick, we talked about this in some of our internal conversations with the Kent team as well, that what the data represents is people identifying which things are most important. And so just because something isn't the most important doesn't mean that they don't agree with it. And so I would caution you to look at that being ranked at the bottom as something that people disagree with, because that's not actually what the question says. It's not an agree, disagree. It is a hierarchy of importance. And so again, that came up kind of in our internal conversations as well. And so I think it's one of those things that Rob and Mike alluded to. If your kids are older, or if your kids are younger and you don't think you're going to stay in the district until they reach 6th grade, right? Like that's going to be at the bottom of the priority for you automatically. It's just not going to be important. We can't infer just from that question alone that there's an agreement or disagreement with that maneuver. That would have to come through other feedback that we all could work to capture, but we can't. I just don't want us to hinge that question on an agree or disagree.
And I think now,
thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, and I think now that we've put the interim report will be out and people will get a chance to give feedback on it, you'll start to get some of that organic feedback of, oh no, or oh yeah. So, and you'll start to get the feel from your constituents and just from the community at large.
Yeah, I'm getting the feeling that it's pretty equally. People think it's great, or people. It's pretty balanced what I'm hearing. So if and when we move 6th graders to middle school, how many portables would we be able to stop using of those 177?
We'd have to calculate that. I would not want to give you a number, because I feel like I could probably do quick math, but I don't want to give you a number and then have to come back and say, well, no, I was wrong. So we could probably calculate that for you. You won't get rid of all of them. I do know that. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, but I do know that there are just under 2,000 6th grade students. Mm-hmm. So, in some of the schools when I looked at it, if you have 3 or 4 6th grade classes at your elementary school, there's 24 kids per class. So you're looking at 100 for 4 grade, 4 classes, you're looking at 100 students. So, you might in some elementary schools be able to eliminate 2, 3, 4 portables. And in others, you may not eliminate any. So we'll have to sit and kind of look at it school by school.
Well, and then through the redistricting as well of moving the boundaries, you start moving in that right in that right direction. The other thing that that does too is it starts to free up space inside the school that then maybe even if you are still utilizing portables, they're not being utilized. And this is an if, but if you do this, maybe they're not being utilized as a full-time classroom now. They're being used as a pull-out classroom, as a special area class, you know, where those type of things. But it puts you on an endeavor to move in the right direction. You know, I was chief operations officer of Louisville, Kentucky Public Schools, Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville. And for us, it was a 20-year process to eliminate portables. And so I think it was in 2016, we finally closed our last portable. And luckily, by the time we did that, they were being used as, in this time, pull out and, you know, outdoor teacher's lounge that was outside of the building. But it is something that you do. If you make a move like this, you sort of draw a line in the sand and then you start moving toward what your final goal is.
And if I could build on that too, I would say when you're talking about levies or bonds for construction, you know, you can also say, hey, we made these changes to eliminate as many portals as we could without asking for money for more construction. You know, you basically get your house in order before then you say, all right, but we've made this as effective as possible, but that still hasn't solved the problem. And so now we do need a bond or a levy to help remedy the rest of the problem.
Rob makes an excellent point there, and I don't think it can be. I don't think it can be understated. When we now live in a society that the majority of people do not have kids in school, a great majority, but those are your taxpayers and those are your tax base, the more ways that you can show that you have been a good steward of their money and that you're using it effectively for children. And, you know, and I always come back to tough decisions, and you've made tough decisions. You've done what was right. And then you say, you know, now we need to pass this, because if we pass this, every kid can be in a classroom. And, you know, and that resonates with the grandparents who don't have kids in school anymore, but, you know, or the future grandparents that someday will and want their kids to be in a classroom and in a high quality school.
The one thing I didn't hear, did you interview anyone, teachers or the KEA, anyone? Because this obviously will affect our teachers too if we move 6th grade students to middle school. So have we discussed that with teachers?
I did not interview any teachers that I'm aware of. I do know. I don't think that I interviewed the KEA representative either, to my knowledge. But definitely, we did have some discussion internally, I know, with Wade and Israel about all of these changes, including the 6th grade, but all these changes are going to cause some shift in staffing, because you're going to have, you know, let's take, not even looking at 6th grade, looking at elementary school. Well, we were at, you know, 600, 700 students, and now we're at 550. Well, there's going to be a corresponding shift in staffing, you know, because they're going to follow the students. So that has definitely been a discussion. Now I'll defer to Wade to talk about any conversations with the organizations.
Yeah, just briefly. There's been some low-level conversations. I mean, I believe that all of our labor partners are well aware that we are in the rebounding process. So that they've all seen parts of presentations, and they know that their voice is important. So as we share at our leadership meeting tomorrow, a very similar process or presentation that we did this evening, they'll have an opportunity there as well. And again, through the 3 community events as well, So, but on the HR side of things, the HR team and myself have been having conversations around the impact of staffing for the last couple of months. So we're already working through various different scenarios around what that looks like, impact on timelines for when the board makes a decision and what that does to our normal yearly timelines around staffing and registration at the high schools and whatnot. So yes, it's top of mind for us. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Behringer. And I appreciate the work that I know Dr. Behringer is continuing to impress upon our labor partners. And Director Behringer, to your question, I know I've had anecdotal conversations with teachers and our labor partners, particularly our EA members over the last 5 years. And I think I've shared with you and our board that there's been a not talk to every one, but there's been a general consensus of from a little more reticence to moving from our sixth graders to middle school over the last 4 or 5 years to seeing it as a reason that we should, whether it's academic reasons or social reasons or emotional reasons. There seems to be more of a consensus. At the same time, we still have opportunities for communication. And I do think that the reasons that have come up based on what our principals, and I know that Rob, you've spoken with several of our building level leaders during the interview process. I can certainly say with a reasonable degree of certainty that those comments that came from our principals did not come from principals alone, that they certainly had the feedback and information from our teachers that provided some of the feedback that we heard about our sixth grade movement opportunity. We'll just call it that. But we'll certainly take that point under strong consideration and continue the feedback loop, making sure that all members of our team KSD are part of the engagement process.
Mr. Turner, I'm curious. In meeting, I heard a lot of staff and building people. Did you actually reach out into the community to meet with, say, the Hispanic Latinos, the Somalis, the multicultural, the K-backs, any of those organizations? Did you go to their events and talk anything with them about any of this?
I did not. We went through the survey process and we, after the first few days, and we're looking at what responses we got and from what demographics we got, then we made efforts to reach out to as many different folks we could through. I know the communications did the heavy lifting. The heavy lifting on this, with multiple reminders and things like that. But what we saw in our demographics was quite encouraging when you looked at the languages spoken, when you looked at the racial ethnic makeup of the respondents, when you looked at student or families that responded from inclusive ed programs or high capacity programs or schools or grade levels, we really felt like we reached a very good representation of the district, and so we did it. We had talked about possibly doing that if we felt like we saw a gap, but to be honest, we really didn't feel like we saw a gap there. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that.
Well, I can't impress enough how engaged your community is. And I mean, that should be something to be extremely proud of. You know, we typically, to Rob's point, we are typically reaching back out to school districts and saying, we see glaring gaps in the data. We see glaring gaps from certain populations or certain schools where we are just not getting the feedback that we'd like. And then something that I do want to again say is, this is halftime in the game, and there's still more feedback to be received. And at some point you have to sort of come forth with your interim report. This is the direction we think things are going to go. You know, I know Rob, early on, one of our first questions, we said, well, yes, of course there can be adjustments, you know, and I don't think we've ever done one of these where we haven't made adjustments after halftime because of the feedback that we received. So if the process starts moving along and we see, oh, we haven't heard from, you know, now how people feel about the plan or the kind of feedback we're getting, we can do some of those secondary reach outs. But it was just a short aside. We kind of had an every day. Casey would call Rob and I and go, I can't believe it. We're at 1,000. We're at 2,000. And it just the feedback that we were getting. It was like watching election results almost, because it was so. It was just so heartening on our part that we were actually getting information from communities about this and not having to pull teeth.
I don't mean to burst your bubble here, because I'm sure you guys are the experts, but there is a lot of value that I've found in advocating or finding out how people feel about by going to people's where they meet and where they congregate and listening one-on-one. And I know it makes it harder with COVID, but that one-on-one contact can, to me, just sometimes be very important. And I have heard from a few leaders of different communities that are feel like they don't really know what's going on here. So I don't know where the misconnect is there. So
President Hamada, if I may, I would be happy to learn more about who feels like they're not being reached by the district, because we do have strong community ties and partnerships with many leaders of color in our district and in our community, and we work very hard to ensure that those relationships are intact. And that is a district responsibility, not MGT's responsibility. And we take a lot of pride in our relationships with our leaders in our community. And so we do reach out to our communities on a regular basis, particularly around district-wide initiatives, but also to inform them about resources and opportunities, not just to ask them when we need something, but to offer them information and resources available to them and our students and our families. So if we're amiss and we're not getting the information that they need and the opportunities, please do let us know. But we do work hard on that.
Sure.
So, Ms. Laramie, I think one of the things that as a district we ought to be doing, and we probably are, but when these responses are coming through, I wonder if we're digging it in or drilling it in based on this pattern, the strand pattern, the feeder strand. Because I feel like, you can't take the voice of one area to mean that this should be what we adhere to. And so I hope we're doing that kind of analysis where we're drilling into those feeder patterns when we're getting comments about transportation or sixth grade move. That's really important to analyze. So.
Absolutely, Director Venkatachalam, we paid very close attention, and I appreciate all the time and effort that Casey spent, particularly with Faith and I, looking at the data daily. So we knew exactly when we weren't hearing from specific schools and communities. So when we say that we heard from the languages and the datas in the schools, we knew because she helped us and let us bug her every day. So we know we didn't hear from all families. We know that the individual survey, feedback that we heard from in October was just the beginning. We're excited to try the Microsoft Live translations in, I think it's a total of 14 different languages, and we practiced it already so that we slow our pace down and that we pick up the live translations on almost all of our top 10 languages. Unfortunately, there's one that Microsoft does not offer, but we are hitting 9 of them. And so I'm really proud to offer that. And that engagement will include our poll everywhere questions. They'll be able to respond to that. So live engagement in our community meetings, and we'll get a real good sense and adjust as we go. But yes, absolutely looking at the data that came in, and we'll use the data, although they can log in as anonymous, we'll be able to see the numbers. We've done Microsoft Live meetings before in the past, and we'll get a sense of not only who's engaging there, but how many people are watching. And if we're missing those opportunities, because the information we're sharing, we're also sharing directly with our communities partners. So those leaders of color, those important CBOs and nonprofits that serve our families, we're sharing this information directly. And if we're not translating it, they're translating it for us. And we're offering those meetings and those Q&A opportunities and those listening sessions if they want it, but we're not forcing it upon them. And so we are doing all of those things as we normally do with our district-wide initiatives. But yeah, we're definitely looking at the data and filling in the gaps where we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And from better or for worse, I'm a bit of a talker. So sometimes it's better and sometimes it's worse. So I apologize up front. But if there is someone that just wants to, I'd be happy to talk to just about anyone. So if there is someone that you feel like, hey, they felt like they were left out or something, I would be happy to communicate with them in some form or fashion. So just wanted to put that out there.
Because Director Hamada, you said something that I do believe in a lot, and and I can tell that that our partners in Kent and and Melissa and her team especially too, it's the relationships and it's the one-on-one interactions. And you're right, COVID has put a strain on those, but we're going to try to be as inclusive as possible and get all views and all voices heard. Casey.
Some of the things that even occurred during the survey that are, kind of in the tall weeds, but to just ensure that anybody who wanted to participate was able to. We had somebody email for a translated survey. It was one of the languages that we had already translated to, but I think they were struggling with probably finding the spot to change it. And so I typed up instructions and we translated those instructions on how they could find it in the survey and sent it back to them. And we had somebody else that said, can you please call me to help me? And so I called a parent and gave the survey to her over the phone so that she was able to participate because she felt like she couldn't participate on the computer, that it was just too involved for her. And so I think I've lost track of how many emails and responses. I think it was over 60 parents that we, well, in that case, they would be parents because they were on that side of the survey, that I personally responded to. And so we made sure if somebody was having trouble logging in, or if they felt like they didn't get the link, or if they had questions, some of them were taking the community survey instead of the parent survey. And so we got them straightened out in those scenarios. So there was a lot of time put in, I can assure you, to ensure that any parent that had reached out that had a question about why we were doing something or needed assistance, we responded to every one of those. And that was Melissa and the Kent team. Again, we did work together daily.
Any other comments or questions from our board?
Well,
I just want to say thank you.
Okay,
oh,
you're welcome.
Go ahead. Yeah, you guys did a really good job.
That we make a good team. We really do. I think we all get along. We value each other's input, expertise, and this I hope has been and will continue to be a good opportunity for you and Kent School District. But I will say it has been a good opportunity for me, and I have appreciated everyone. And I can't say enough about how well we have been able to connect and to work together.
Yes, thank you. I'm more than what the board thinks. I'm excited to hear what the community has to say at the forums, and I'm hoping to attend all of them myself just to listen.
No, and I do appreciate again the detailed report that I now have in front of me to read and print, and I will have some more time to go through it. I think this is a very important thing to our community, and our parents, and especially our kids, are going to be affected by it, and trying to get it right, because when you get that many surveys answered, it means people are paying attention. So we want to pay attention, and they've got our attention, I hope. So anyway, thank you so much for all the work, and to all our staff here that's worked with them and trying to get this right and stuff. I think the problem is I'll hear something or somebody else will hear something, and together maybe we'll try to hit every point we can, because we can't be every place to everyone. And so, if we can all contribute, that's how we're going to get down the road. So again, thank you, Mr. Tanner, Ms. Price, and Mr. Razor for your hard work here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And am I correct that this concludes pretty much what we were here to discuss tonight? I don't want to leave anything undone that we're supposed to do, but I do have a holiday party to go to tonight.
I just want to take a moment to thank our board of directors. We certainly, on behalf of MGT and all of our team, we thank you for the work you do in support of KSD.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Goes
thank
without
you,
saying,
Drew.
absolutely, that this work can't be done by accident. And I want to thank MGT certainly for the planning process to create this plan. This is, by all intents and purposes, this is the easy part, right? The next part, as hard as that was, we know that. And so we want to continue to stick together, stay together, make sure we're communicating early and often. Thank you, each and every one, from our board to our team to MGT. This is truly a team effort, and we'll look forward to being better as an organization as a result of this process. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
It is 7:18, and I'm adjourning this meeting. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Good evening.
See you guys later. We're stronger together.
Yes.